Okay, good morning, everybody. Good morning, a good Yom Tiv. So we're starting a new siman today in HaDerech Shulchan Aruch. So let me get the what we need over here on the screen. So we're going to do things just a bit differently today because I guess first of all, the material that we're learning today really calls for it, and especially since it's Chav Kislev, Hemshech to Yutes Kislev, it's still Yom Tiv. So in terms of how the Alter Rebbe wanted halacha learned, it happens to correspond pretty well to what the subject is today. So I'm just going to take a look over here first, just from the Hakdama to Alter Rebbe to the Mittler Rebbe, Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch at the beginning. So the Mittler Rebbe, everybody sees the, you can see over here? Yeah, Hakdamas?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, good. So the second, I just pulled out a few pieces. I should lay pamushtaim shamaitim piru kodshazal. That not once or twice, in other words, many times he heard from the Alter Rebbe, Shem Yigmer Hashem Ba'adei, that Hashem enabled him to Yitzavah B'Gzeiras Hirim Pizgomim L'Chlolos Hanash Migdei Mat Ketanom B'Chol Ir Uminyan, that he would make a Gzeira on all places of Anash, Sheikfu Itim Bagudas Chavedim Lilmeid B'Alachas B'Tamein V'Liyas B'Kiyim B'Hem, that they should set aside time for learning halachas with the reasons behind them, and to be expert in them. To the extent that every halacha should be clear in their mouths. In other words, everybody should be clear in the halachas. And when he says b'taimeyan, so that was one of the chidushim of the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, that he went on the derech halavush, like what the lavush did for early generation, that he wrote the reasons for the halachas. But included in the reasons, there's the reason and the mucker. So here in the next page, he brings the Seder Alimut that the Mittler Rebbe was makabel from the Alter Rebbe, how it is you're supposed to learn. So first he says, Lamisha Ishel Shas Akesha. Person has the whole day to learn. Guys in Kalos, so this is how we should learn. Umisha Ein Le Shas Akesha Kol Kach. And somebody doesn't have the whole day to learn, if Netir Dosa Basic Me'at, that he has to do a little bit of work too. So then he should learn the following. And then this paragraph, which is highlighted in yellow, a person that's mamish extremely busy, and he only has 2 or 3 hours to learn Torah. Okay, we'll let that slip for now, but that's what he's calling the trudim b'yeser. So then already it's interesting from this equation of what he has to learn. The Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch drops out over here, which he even said in the previous one. Okay, so the thing is, the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch is much longer. You're not going to learn halachas atzrichas. So Yizar Lasses Kvisten Mudam Mishnayas Valachas Harif Al Kopanim Lavade. At least learn from the Mishnah and the Psukim in the Rif, because then you'll see the mucker. Where did these dinim come from? And you should learn the Shulchan Aruch HaKatzir. So this is not talking about our Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. Our Kitzur Shulchan Aruch was written after the Mittler Rebbe. He's talking about the Machaber Ramah. Other places in the Igros, the Mittler Rebbe says about learning Poshet Piskim Psukim at a Machaber together with Bar Heitev. And you learn in the morning, and then you chazer over the same thing at night. Learn 2 pages a day. I didn't really figure out how much that is in today's pages, what print he's talking about with these 2 pages. Other places he said to learn a simon a day or 2 simonim a day, depending on the size. So you know from the source, the way it is in the Gemara, all the way to the Psak Din, so you see the source from where it is. So we don't learn like that, and we didn't even see when the Rebbe spoke many letters in Igros where the Rebbe speaks about learning halacha l'mais, and he speaks about learning first of all Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. And Kitzur Shulchan Aruch is obviously without without the reasons in general, and certainly without the mucker from the Gemara. But on the topic we're learning today, we're doing Tefilas HaDerech, which is Siman Samach Ches, chapter 68 in the Kitzur. Our practice is somewhat different from what you're going to see in the Kitzur. And the Kitzur is going after Minig Ashkenaz, and many times our Minig is different. In fact, many times what we do, since the Alter Rebbe changed many things from the Shulchan Aruch to the Siddur, we have a Kabbalah that the Alter Rebbe, toward the end of his life, regretted that he relied so much on the Achreinim, particularly the Magen Avraham, especially when it was something that was Adas Yochid, and he passed on like that anyway. But later on in his life, we see that in Madura Basra, and you see that certainly in the Siddur, that he changed some of the psukim that he ruled in the Shulchan Aruch and changed later on. And we see this very, very clearly when it comes to Tefilas HaDerech. When we have certain Kabbalahs from the Sichas of the Frierdiker Rebbe and say from Menhagim and the Anhagas of the Rebbe that we see clearly from what's printed in the Siddur and from the practice of the Rebbeim that it's a lot different. And to understand the context, I decided we're going to start from the Gemara. It's not much Gemara, it's just a very short section of Gemara Brachas. So we're going to learn that first, and then learn together with the Kitzur and the different Hanhagas. We'll see what's in Sefer Menhagim and so on. Okay, any questions before we start? Okay, fine. So now we're going to, you should see over here on the screen, Gemara Brachas, yeah? And we'll go down over here till we get to the yellow part. So there's a whole discussion about Tefillah Kitzur when a person's traveling and they can't say the whole davening. What should they daven? They can't even say for the whole Shemona Esrei and so on. It's in the context of this whole discussion. And we'll start over here from the Gemara. Amar Eliyol Rav Yehuda Achud Rav Saleh Chasida. So he says, Lo tirchach v'lo techte, lo tarviv v'lo techte, that you shouldn't get angry, and thereby not sin, and you shouldn't get shikr, and thereby not sin. And then when you want to go out on a trip, himalech, like Rashi says of Yaltel Rishus, you should take permission from your creator, v'tzei, and then you should go out. Mahi malach b'kenech v'tzei, and what does it mean that you should get permission from your creator and then go on? How do you get permission from the creator to go? Amar Rabbi Yankiv, Amar Rav Chisda, Zut Tefilas HaDerech. So he's referring to saying Tefilas HaDerech. What's the connection between these earlier statements about anger and about becoming shikr? There's a whole discussion. It's not for now. It's not so Negei Halacha, but part of this is Negei Halacha, which is why we read it. Okay, now you have the actual some of the dinim. Amar Rav Yankiv, Amar Rav Chisda. Okay, number one, Kol ha'yetzel l'derech tzorech lispal Tefilas HaDerech. So if a person is going out on the derech, and we didn't really define what the derech is yet, it's a requirement to say Tefilas HaDerech. And there's a whole discussion in the Paskim, what kind of bracha is this? It doesn't start with bracha, it starts with Yehiratzen. So it doesn't start with bracha, so is it a regular bracha? Many of the Rishonim say it's not a regular bracha, and it doesn't say tzorech levarech, it says tzorech lepispal, it's a tefillah, Yehiratzen. My Tefilas HaDerech, so what is Tefilas HaDerech? What's the nusach? Yehiratzen mefanecha, Shema lakai shetoilicheni l'sholem v'tzatzideni l'sholem v'sismacheni l'sholem v'tzatzileni mikav kolei v'erev v'derech v'sishlach brach v'maisa yadai v'sitneni l'chein l'chesed l'rachmin b'necha v'kol royai baruch atah Hashem shemei tefillah. So some of these parentheses you see in the Hagois, other achreinim that put in other pieces that we also have it on Nusach of Tefilas HaDerech, as I'm sure you noticed. There are many things which are missing here, but the first thing the Gemara picks on is that all of this is in Lashon Yochid. Shema Lakai, instead of Lakeinu. Shetei Licheini, instead of Shetei Licheinu. All that we have in singular, V'satzi Leini, V'sitneini, we have in singular, but everything else we have in plural. Where did that come from? It comes from the Gemara. Amar Abaye. So Abaye said, next to this is the Lamed Om Aleph, Lish to finish nafshe ba'adid tzibura, that a person should make himself a shutef. He's making a Tefilah Kitzur, Rashi in the upper right. Lishtaf nafshe al ispal Tefilah Kitzur b'loshen yochid el b'loshen rabim. K'mitech kach Tefilos nishmas. So in order that your Tefilah, just going to mute everybody. Excuse me. Yeah. So in order that your Tefilah should be heard, there should be b'loshen rabim. Where does it come from? Okay, and therefore he says, so that's all in Lashon Rabim. On Nusach of Tefilas HaDerech, so here we have Yiratzim Ofanach Hashem Elokeinu V'Elokei V'Seinu, Shetei Lecheinu L'Sholem, V'Satzideinu L'Sholem, V'Sadricheinu L'Sholem, V'Sismecheinu L'Sholem, all is Lashon Rabim, V'Sagiyeinu L'Mches Chavtzeinu, L'Chaim L'Sim Kol Sholem. Then if Imdaite Lachzer Miyad, and we're going to talk about that, Remus Achizireinu L'Sholem is also Lashon Rabim, V'Satzileinu Mikav Kolei V'Eriv Listim Chayis Rolas B'Derech, yeah, Mikol Paranis, Mismag Shavaz L'Elam, V'Sish L'Bro B'Chamais Yodeinu, and then we said V'Sitneini Lashon Yochid. Okay, so where did this come from? So this is Al Pi Kabbalah, and the Magen Avram quotes it from a Kabbalah sefer called Sefer HaKana, and Sefer HaKana says that up till now, you see, if what it is, mitzad just the time of the Gemara, then you should say V'Sitnei Nu also. Why is it different? If you want your tefillah to be heard, you should be mashatif yourself with the rabbim. So why is Sitnei different? So the Sefer HaKana brings that in addition to the tzibur down here, there's another tzibur, and those are the malachim that are accompanying the person on their journey. So therefore, you say Shetei Lecheinu L'Sholem is that you're including the malachim. Satzideinu, all of this is you together with the malachim, because you need the malachim for their protection along the way. So therefore, you're saying it all b'lashon rabim. But then when you want chen chesed v'rachim, you should be matzliach in what it is you're being sent to. So then when you say b'lashon yochav v'sitnei ni, then he has another hezbollah. So if that's the case, why do you have at the end? Why is that lashon yochid? So it's another bir api Kabbalah, and it's not so easy to explain. So we're going to leave that for now. But that's why V'Sitneini is the exception to the rule, which the short answer to that, it's not Kabbalah. And he does mention this sort about the malachim. In any case, that's the Gemara over here. So it's a source. Our whole nusach over here, the source is from the Gemara, from a bias advice to say things b'lashon rabim. And it's a Magen Avram, the Mishnah Berurah paskins like that also. So it's not only something Al Pi Kabbalah. The Magen Avram brings Kabbalah in many, many places, Ben Kitzur Arizal, and so too other achreinim, other paskim, even on the pages of Shulchan Aruch, bring very often Inyan Kabbalah. And this is something which has reached the level of general acceptance. Okay, let's go for the.
What is the connection between the tzibur and my trip? If they're not going on the trip and I'm going on the trip, what am I connecting the tzibur to?
There are other people. There's a whole. I was trying to sort of to avoid. There's a general discussion. I just mentioned briefly about the nature of this bracha. It says Yispal Tefilas HaDerech. What kind of bracha is this? So one of the opinions in the Rishonim is that it's not a different bracha than the bracha Shemei Tefilah. We have a bracha Shemei Tefilah. So this is just another manifestation of the bracha Shemei Tefilah. It's not a separate bracha altogether. And even though a person Shemona Esrei is asking the first bracha starting from Chen Ados and so on, or in general are brachas for the Yachid, and after that the Kabbalah Shofar is already bakashas for the rabbim, but Shemei Tefilah, a person can add individual requests in Shemaya Tefillah, but nevertheless, when you're asking for things, everybody's asking for things in Shemaya Tefillah. So everybody's asking their individual things, but since we're all asking, so it ends up having a gather of people together. When you have a Shemana Esrei, people are davening, so they're all davening. Everybody might be davening for something somewhat different in Shemaya Tefillah, at least. And nevertheless, it still has together a Tefilas Hatzibur. That's the easiest way to explain it. It's a little more than that, but it ends up having many ramifications. Allah Turis, al Machlekes about. We'll soon see. Some of them are very relevant to Allah.
In brachas, in the morning, we say Yiras Mefnacha. We say Shetzatzi Leini Hayim Uvachol Yim, and we're talking about as a fanim, as is panim, and a lot of people are dealing with these on a daily basis. Shouldn't we have said that in the Lashon of Rabbi?
Okay, you're asking a good question. I'm not sure, but we're not learning those right now. So let's stick with these. Let's go further. Now we have some very controversial halachas that are going to come out of this statement. I say controversial because there are different practices and different ways that Rishonim understand what's going on. Emas matzli. When do you say this tefillah? So Amar Rav Yankiv, Amar Rav Chisda. See, that's what we're trying to say. Emas matzli. Mishosh mahalech baderech. From the time that you're going baderech. Now, I'm just going to mention that there are opinions that say that it's also when you decided that you're going baderech. And therefore, there are opinions that say that as soon as you decide you're leaving, you can make Tefilas HaDerech already in your house before you even started your trip. La'alacha, we don't paskin like that, but it's the knowledge that there is such an opinion is going to help us understand the different days that we're going to soon encounter and the different practices that we're going to see in the Kitzur as opposed to our minig. So it says from the time shemahalach b'derech. And then the Gemara asks, ad kama? How much? Until how much? So Rashi says, ad kama zman lispal. Then how much time do you have to say this tefillah? So Amar Rav Yankiv Rav Chisda ad parsa. Until a parsa. How big is a parsa? So a parsa is 4 mil. So 4 mil in metric system is a little less than 4 kilometers. 3.84, Chaim Noah says. Obviously, we'll go into the Chazon Ish, it's bigger, but Chaim Noah is 3.84 kilometers, which in the English system is 2.386 miles. A little less than 2.5 miles. That's called a parsa. Parsa is 4 mil. So what does it mean, ad parsa? So there's 2 opinions Rashi is going to bring down. Ad parsa, Rashi says his own opinion. Ad kama is when can you say it? You can say it ad kama, ad parsa. Only in the first parsa are you allowed to make this bracha. According to Rashi, it's only the beginning of the trip. And therefore, when the Gemara said first, Amar Rav Yankiv Rav Chisda, Mishosh mahalech b'derech, emas matzli, when can you, according to Rashi, emas matzli, when are you allowed to make this bracha? Mishosh mahalech b'derech. Okay, once you start on the trip. And ad kama, according to Rashi, how much time do you have to say it? Ad parsa, until the parsa. And according to Rashi, after you've been on the derech for a parsa, you can't make it anymore. Farfal, it's too late. You can only make it at the beginning of the trip. Now, what complicates this in our present-day situation is what's the definition of derech? A derech is when you're outside the city. So it used to be, especially if it's a walled city, it's very, very clear when you're outside the city. You have the city, then you have ibura shel ir, you have the 70 and amas and a little bit more, which is a very short distance outside the city, which is still included in the city. But when you're outside the city, so then you're in fields. There's no houses anymore. And if there's a house within Ibura Shalir, so then you keep extending it until you get to the point that there's more than 70 amas from one house to another. And then you start counting, that's the beginning of the derech. But today, in Montreal, in New York, any big city, when you're driving, there's houses all around. and there's cities on each side of the highway. So at what point does it start the derech? And it could be, if you're going to say it right when you get in your car, or right when you get on the highway. So it could be you're not, it's mishosham alich b'derech, not even on the derech yet. So that complicates this whole thing. So you want to be machna like Rashi and say it in the first parsa, but it's very difficult to do that because you don't know where that parsa is measured from. You don't know, mishahichzik b'derech, we're going to see the Lashon Shulchan Aruch. Well, but it's very difficult to determine precisely in most cities and most trips that people take where that's going to be. Then Rashi brings down a second opinion. Go back to Rashi, the third line. Rashi, Bahag Mafarish Ad Kama Yavakish Leilech Shehet Tzorach Lispal. What does it mean, Ad Kama? The Bahag learns how big a trip do you need before you have to say Tefilas HaDerech. Let's say you're just making a short trip. Let's say you're making a trip that's less than a parsa. You're going outside Tchum Shabbos. Tchum Shabbos is, you say midrabanim is 2,000 amas is 1 meal. Let's say you're going a trip of 2 meal. It's half a parsa. So you're going half a parsa. Okay, but you're going outside the city. According to Bahag, it's not a long enough trip. If you're going less than a parsa, then it's b'chan nar begeder Tefilas HaDerech. Yeah. Yeah, aber derech pachas mi parsa ain't tzarich lispal tefillah. See, and if it's ain't tzarich, you're not allowed to. Otherwise, the bracha levatala. B'chal, when you're dealing hilchos brachas, when it says ain't tzarich means you don't have to, but you can if you want. Normally, ain't tzarich means you're not allowed because it's a bracha shein tzarich. If it's ain't tzarich, so then you don't make the bracha. So there's a major difference according which one of these two opinions you're going to follow. Ad kama, according to Rashi, means you how much time do you have to say this bracha? You have to say it in the first parsa. But according to Bahag, ad kama is how long is the trip? Ad parsa. But that if it's less than a parsa, you don't make the bracha, but you make the bracha if it's a trip longer than a parsa. Okay, this is the background. We'll soon see how it all comes down to halacha l'maisa soon. This is just background, as I mentioned before. Now, how should you say this tefillah? Rav Chisda Amar Ma'umet. So Rav Chisda says you should say it Ma'umet, standing. And Rav Sheshus Amar Afila Mahalich. And Rav Sheshus said you can do it even if you're walking. You don't have to say it Ma'umet. You can say it even Mahalich. And then the Gemara tells a story. So the halachic story time in the Gemara is there's halachic implications of stories. That's why the Gemara is telling it. So Rav Chisda, Rav Sheshus Avakaz Lebeorcha. So Rav Chisda and Rav Sheshus were traveling on the derech. They were going on a trip. Come Rav Chisda v'komatzli. So Rav Chisda stood and davened. Said Tefilas HaDerech. Yeah. Amalei Rav Sheshus l'shamai. Ma kavod Rav Chisda. Rav Sheshus says that Rashi points out that Rav Sheshus was unable to see. He couldn't see. So he asked his assistant, what's Rav Chisda doing? So Amalei koy matzli. He said he's standing and he's davening. He's saying Tefilas HaDerech. Amalei ukmanami l'didi vatzli. Help me also stand, and I'm also going to daven. Why? Miyesh tev al tikrera. That if you could do it and be good, it shouldn't be called bad. Rashi says on the right hand side, since I'm able to daven standing, shari chaburasa yamedes, because the whole group I'm traveling with is also standing, and I'll add the word still. So I don't want to be called bad that I'm going to say this tefillah when I'm still walking. Even though la halacha, the Rav Chisda, Rav Sheshus hold, you don't have to say it mu'umid. It's okay to say it when you're walking. But nevertheless, since everybody else is also not walking, so why should I be the one out? And I'm going to dafke be the one to say it ma'alech, so I'm not going to. So the Tesis brings down over here. You have the different opinions and who says like what, and the Rav Chisda adifel etvei. So according to the Rif, that even though the halacha taka like Rav Chisda, you can say it sitting, but it's better to do like you're allowed to do like Rav Sheshus and say when you're walking, it's better to look Rav Chisda. Now, I didn't really carefully translate the word mu'umat, because mu'umat could be translated two different ways. Let's say a person is riding on a horse. So when they're riding on the horse or the wagon or the train or the car for that matter, when it's moving, so then you say it's mahalich. And then if you stop the car, then it's aimed. Now it's standing still. Even though you might be sitting on the horse, in the wagon, and so on, that is one way of learning the difference between standing and not standing. Do you have to stop the wagon? Do you have to stop the car? Or do we say mu'umad means literally to stand up? So what exactly was happening over here? It seems that Rav Chisda and Rav Sheshes were not traveling on a wagon. It seems that they were walking. And it seems that Rav Chisda stopped walking. Now, obviously, he was standing up, and wondering what was with Rav Sheshes when he said, Ukman nami lididi v'atzli. Ukman was that, to help him stop or to help him stand up. So it's not 100% clear. I'm going to go straight to Sefer Minhagim over here to see what was the practice of the Rebbe Rashab. We have in Sefer Minhagim. So you see over here, Tefilas HaDerech v'zitneini b'loshen yochid l'chein l'chesed hulu, that we know. It's from the Magen Avraham. And here's a sikh from the Frierdiker Rebbe, that the Rebbe Nishmas Eden based on a seal in Neis Desha, Kerem b'pam hashniya tikkun leil shvuos. He would say, when he would go to Dacha, to go to the country, so he would say in the summer, he would say the tikkun leil shvuos the second time. Ukeshanesim k'arba parsois v'yorst. When he would go 4 parsa, Mitzaba lamed v'netul yodav mispal Tefilas HaDerech. He would tell them lamed. But pashtus, that means they should stop traveling. He was traveling in a wagon, but pashtus. Then he would wash his hands and he would say Tefilas HaDerech. And then with more pratius, Tefilas HaDerech bekarin. So when he was traveling in a wagon, so Rebbe Nishmas Eden mispal b'yeshiva. He would say Tefilas HaDerech when he was sitting. Ubemerkeves b'amida. And when he was going on a train, then he would stand up. So it seems that even though he would say it b'yeshiva, but he would tell the wagon to stop. So he's saying it mu'umet, and then he's doing according to Rav Chisda. Meis teif. Okay, when he was on the train, where you can't really tell the train to stop, so then he stood up and was also doing according to Rav Chisda. A different way of understanding Rav Chisda, he was also doing it mu'umet. Why would he not stand up in the wagon? So again, when he was just traveling by himself, he told him to stop, and then he got out and he washed his hands. It seems that he got out to do this. When you look at the original sikh, it's clear that he went into the woods and he washed his hands. He wasn't doing that inside the wagon. And there's a whole debate, which I'm not going to go into at this point, about what would possibly be the difference between inside a wagon and inside a train, or inside a plane for that matter. But we'll leave it for now. So it's certainly preferable. Okay, we'll soon see what the Alter Rebbe says in the Siddur. And when he left his house, even when he remained in one place for many months, say Tefilas HaDerech every day. And this is something that we don't really see any hint of this here in the Gemara. When you look at this Gemara, what does it say? It says, Kol Yetzel HaDerech tzarech lispal Tefilas HaDerech. Okay, and what's Tefilas HaDerech? And it tells you what's Tefilas HaDerech. So it says when you're Yetzel HaDerech, you have to say Tefilas HaDerech. Why are you saying Tefilas HaDerech when you're standing still? Furthermore, the Gemara then asks, Emes Matzli, Mishosha Mahalach B'derech. Once you're going on the road, Ad Kama. So according to Rashi, Ad Kama means that how far along the trip is the maximum you can do before Tefilas HaDerech, and according to the Bahag, it's the length of the trip. But if you're staying in a hotel for a long period of time, so where do you see from this that you say Tefilas HaDerech? And this is, let's see what the Alter Rebbe says. So we have over here in the Siddur. I'm going straight. I understand we're working a little bit backwards. we're learning the Gemara, and then we're jumping straight to Sefer Minhagim and the Siddur, but it's very difficult to follow otherwise. You will read the Shulchan Aruch will be possibly very confusing if you don't learn it this way. In any case, so Tefilas HaDerech, so the Alter Rebbe writes over here, and as we know, when there's a disagreement between the Shulchan Aruch and the Siddur, we go like the Siddur. He said, Tzorach la'emer hichzik baderech. This Lashon HaShulchan Aruch. Shehichzik baderech. He doesn't give a definition of what it means, hichzik baderech. But it's clearly when you're chutz la'ir. You have to be outside the city. And you're hichzik baderech. B'yem b'rishon kishenaseyam ibeisei. The first day that you're traveling from your house. V'tev le'mer mu'umad im efsher bakal. And it's good to say it's standing if it's possible. And he adds the word bakal, if it's possible to do easily. And the rest of the days that he's still baderech until he goes back to his house, it says that every morning in the hotel, in other words, he's not going anywhere. There's no time to say it on the derech. He's staying in one place. But since he didn't come home yet, this is so-called the derech. There's another chiddush, it's derech hagav over here, that normally when you say a bracha without shem and malchus, this bracha, even when you do say with the shem, we don't have malchus over here. It says borach ato shemei tefillah. That's why some of the poskim say bli shem and malchus, so it doesn't really make too much sense to say bli shem and malchus. We never say it with malchus. It's always only Baruch Atah Hashem Shemei Tefillah. We don't say with Malchus. Anyway, the Alter Rebbe, it's a diuk. A lashon over here, Bli Askaras Hashem. It's also interesting diuk. Normally, when you say a bracha without Shem and Malchus, you say Baruch, and then you say Baruch Hamavdol Mekedesh L'chol. So over here, what would be the corresponding statement without Haskaras Hashem would be Baruch Shemei Tefillah. Whereas in the Alter Rebbe says Baruch Atah Shemei Tefillah, which is an interesting diuk. I always wondered whether this should be done in all places where you say without Shem Malchus, because there's no chsaron in saying the word Ato, and then you're mentioning Atzmus Umuhus. So it's the more meduik, and you're not saying Mamish Bracha, because it ends up being a Machalikas Aposkim, and he's avoiding it. So what is the source for the Alter Rebbe? So you have over here Chassidish Sefer. He's from the big Pesach, the Mishmer Shalom, and much of the Chassidic world goes like him. Many of his very interesting psukim. So he has over here in Tefilas HaDerech. So he brings down over here Habach Zal Kosov. So he quotes down with the Bach on the tour, and he writes that every day that you're traveling, you have to make the bracha every day in the morning. And he says the davar apashat. The Gemara says clear, Shulchan Aruch says clear. When you go on a trip, you have to make a bracha. Furthermore, the Gemara says, the Shulchan Aruch brings down from the Kolbei that if a person went on a trip, let's say a person went from Montreal to Toronto. So he said Tefilas HaDerech, and then they went to a hotel in Toronto. They're planning on going from Montreal to Toronto to Winnipeg to Vancouver. Okay, and each one is going to take a day. So they drove from Montreal to Toronto, and they go to a hotel, and they're resting in the hotel. They're going to catch a little bit of sleep, and then go the next day. Meanwhile, they can't sleep. So the person changes their mind and says, you know what? I can't sleep in the middle of the day. I might as well drive. So the person leaves. So Ser Shulchan Aruch, the Machaber says that the person has to make another bracha. Why? Because he was Masalik Daite, that he took his mind off of traveling. So now this is a new trip, even though it's the same day. But certainly if it's the next day, it's like all brachas are like that. And Birchas HaShachar, and what happened to Birchas HaShachar, that each day, L'chura is machalik from one day to another. So if you slept and you stayed over, and then the next day comes, so it's like you're saying Birchas HaShachar, so too you have to make a new Tefilas HaDerech. So then the Bach writes, Fu davar pashat, lo yoy yitzarach l'keisvei. I didn't even write, it's so obvious. So this is just the people that make a mistake to make sure you don't make this mistake. So the Mishmer Shalom v'neirois nifleisi al Rabbeinu Harab b'siddur. Because it's El Sheinin. Bashar Yom Shemakim B'derech Hatshuva LeBeisei Yemer is B'chol Beker B'Lunim Yachnim Baruch. Top of the next column. Baruch Ato Shmei Tefila B'li Askaras Hashem Ad Hashem. Lo Yadaiti Minayin Le, says Mishmer Shalom. I don't know where did he get this from. Hula Chayre Neger Kol HaPaskim. It looks like it's going against all the Paskim. Begam Huzal B'Shulchan Aruch Shalei Kosev Kedivra Kol HaPaskim. V'lo Hevi Shum Dei Acheres. The Alter Rebbe in the Shulchan Aruch doesn't even bring another opinion. Yeah. But Tzarachin Godly writes, but something like the Alter Rebbe, such a gon v'kadosh, must have had a source. So here where he gives an eitzah that you should say Tefilas HaDerech in the middle of Shemei Tefillah and Shmoneh Esrei. That's the eitzah of, so he doesn't go to say like the Alter Rebbe says, but he does worry about the Alter Rebbe in terms of making the bracha. Now, there's a number of explanations of where the Alter Rebbe got this from. So first of all, in terms of Poskim, the Pri Chodesh says clearly like this. The Alter Rebbe is saying the same thing as the Pri Chodesh. The Pri Chodesh brings a number of points. One thing the Pri Chodesh points out that the Rambam does not bring this bracha b'chlal. So he brings the other, the Tefilah Kitzur and so on that's brought on that page in the Gemara, but the Rambam does not have any nusach of Tefilas HaDerech. And there's a whole discussion, Mefarsha Rambam, why the Rambam omits Tefilas HaDerech. But the fact is the Rambam omits Tefilas HaDerech. That's the fact. Plus, as some of the other Achreinim also point out, that there's a din that if a person was traveling the whole night and the person didn't sleep, so what do they do the next day? And we have a similar machlekes when you have Birchas HaShachar. What happens if the person was up the whole night? Do they make all Birchas HaShachar in the morning? And there's a whole machlekes for this, the Hirobah Chashoy that Rebbe said about saying all Birchas HaShachar, but it's a ganz nishpashet. It's not simple that if you stayed up the whole night, that just because it's a new day that you should be saying Tefilas HaDerech, saying Birchas HaShachar. In any case, in general, the poskim, Rav poskim would say that in such a case you make Tefilas HaDerech without Shem Malchus. So we do see such a concept that if the trip has not been interrupted, then just because it's a new day, you can't make a new bracha b'shem. So therefore, if you define the trip as leaving your house, so then you're on a trip until you get back to your house. So it's one long trip. So you're still in the middle of the trip. As long as you're still in the middle of the trip, doesn't matter if you slept or you didn't sleep. You're in the middle of the trip. So therefore, you can't say Birchas Tefilas HaDerech with Hashem, using Hashem's name. There are poskim that say you should. Okay, so say with Hashem and Malchus. We see many cases, especially in the Siddur, and later on, the Alter Rebbe was very much more cheshish to the Chash Bracha Levatala. There's a opinion that says it's a Bracha Levatala, which would be, according to the Rambam, Pri Chodesh, then you say with Hashem and Malchus. So we see that the Alter Rebbe, Gon V'Kodesh, whether this exactly was the Alter Rebbe's makar or not, there are those that say that Tila David speaks about it. Many of the Achreinim, Dayan Raskin has in the Siddur a whole long description of this. And that is, in general, the explanation, or at least one of the explanations of our minhag. So I'll stop now for some questions.
Someone goes to New York on Sunday and comes back the following Sunday. According to this Alter Rebbe, when he comes back that day, he still doesn't make the bracha of Shem Malchus?
Correct. Because it's one long trip until you get home. That you see from the Siddur over here. Yeah. Yeah. Ubashara yomim shemisaka b'derech ad shuvay lebeisei. Now,
but some people make their home.
They learn that it means that if you're making the trip to go back home. In any case, according to the Pri Chodesh, it's certainly not like that. According to the Chash that you worried about, the Chash Bracha Levatala, according to the Rambam, so the Rambam doesn't have this at all. There's a question in the chat why the Shem at the beginning is not an issue. Is because it's not a bracha. The inyan of Shem Shamayim Levatala, we see, in the times of the Tanakh, certainly the people were saying, Baruch Hashem, they were saying Hashem's name, It's not saying Baruch Hato with Hashem, with a bracha has a special chumrah, which is way beyond Shem Shamayim Levatala. When you say a bracha has much more of a chumrah. So the Yiratzen, that's not a bracha, and you're asking Hashem for all different sorts of brachas to save you from different sorts of things. So that's certainly meant sincerely, and the person needs it. There's another machlekes the Yachreinim speak. Let's say a person's going in a place that we don't have listim v'chayes rois baderech. There's no eiv ha'erev. So there are from the Heintige from today's last generation's poskim that write that since when you're driving in a car, there's still various sorts of dangers. There are al tiftach car accidents and other sorts of dangers that enable a person to say Tefilas HaDerech. There were those who wanted to say that today we don't have this sort of, there's no lions and tigers that are going to jump out of the highway into your car, so we don't have the same need as described in this nusach, and therefore I shouldn't say it, but the consensus of the poskim is that we have other sorts of dangers, and therefore we still say it. Some of the poskim go in the opposite direction, and they say, on the contrary, let's say you have dangers within the city. You could be within the city, you're driving on the highway within the city, so you didn't go chutz la'ir. You're not going chutz la'ir at all. Not only you're not going up parsa, you're not going outside the city at all. You're staying in the city. But it's dangerous. The driving could be dangerous. The walking could be dangerous. You're in the city, there could be danger. So there are poskim that says that under those situations, if it's dangerous even walking in the city, so then you do say Tefilas HaDerech. There is certainly nothing wrong to say it b'lishem malchus. I obviously wouldn't say it. There's no malchus anyway. To say just Baruch Hato Shmei Tefillah, not use Hashem's name, so that would be acceptable in such a case too. Okay, so let's now go to the Kitzur, and if we have some time, we'll, actually let's do all the other makeres for things that that happened. Okay, here's just Chaim Noah's definition of a parsa. So you can see over here, parsa is 4 mil, 3840 meters, 3.8 milliliters, 3.8 kilometers. Yeah. Okay, so that's as far as that's concerned. Sefer Minhagim, we did. Alter Rebbe's Akdama, we did. Mishmer Shalom, we did. Okay, let's just go straight to the Kitzur. We'll come back. We have some other things to look at. Okay, so here's Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, Seven Samachesdem, Tefilas HaDerech, Ashar Devarim Shetzarichin Lazar B'Derech, Ubayid Beisifim. So the first 5 sifim are about Tefilas HaDerech, and then there are other things regarding going on trips. So Sif Aleph, Hayetzel HaDerech, Bein Mi Beisei, Bein Mi Makom Shehoya Lon B'Derech. So whether you're going on the trip from your house, which means the first day of the trip, or you're traveling from the place where you stayed overnight. So if you went to a hotel on the derech and then you're leaving after that, and so too when you go home, la'achar, take the questions on the chats in a second. Finish the Allah first. When you left Ibura Shel Ir, how far is that? 70 amas and 2/3 of an amma. When there are no longer any houses, mispal Tefilas HaDerech. Okay, then you say Tefilas HaDerech. Okay, then we say it in plural. Rak v'sitneini l'chein omer b'loshen yochid. So the kids are also paskins, like the Magen Avraham. V'yeser tev la'amr la'achar sheyotze mil mibura shel ir. And it's best to say it after you already went 1 meal out of the 4 meal, of which is the parsa mibura shel. So in Yizkar b'Shulchan Aruch Rabbeinu, not only it's not a mental outside of Shulchan Aruch, I really couldn't find this anywhere. I'm not sure where the Bala Kitzur got it from. It's evidently his definition of what's called hichzik HaDerech, and we don't find this among the other poskim. Once you're already on the road and you stayed overnight in a city, then you can say it in the morning even before you left. So here we see that even though, you see on the top line of Sif Aleph, so it's passing like the Rav Paskim, that each part of the trip is considered separately, and you say Tefilas HaDerech with Hashem. And just to answer, the question, when you say without Haskaras Hashem, Baruch Atah Shmei Tefillah, but the rest of it you do say Hashem's name, Elokeinu. You don't say with a kuf, you say it as it's printed in the Siddur, because that doesn't have the special stringency of a bracha she'eina tzricha or a bracha levatala, according to those opinions that exempt you from saying it. But the Kitzur Paskins, like the Rav Paskim, and he's not concerned about those that say it's a bracha she'eina tzricha or a bracha levatala. So therefore, he says, "Bein mi beisei." That one we do say Baruch Atah Hashem Shemei Tefillah. And he says also from the hotel you stayed along the way. So when you leave there, it's the second leg of the trip. So you should say it with Hashem's name. So the Alter Rebbe in the Siddur says not like that. And when you come home, also it's another leg of the trip, and it's considered a new trip. We're going to the Alter Rebbe, it's all part of one long trip from when you leave your house to when you arrive at your house. And we see that although that's pretty clear, that's the Shulchan Aruch Paskins, but the Gemara does not say that. And that's where you have room for a machlekes. Let me just get to the questions on the chat. 1 second. I should just leave this chat box open. Yeah, one question. Do you say the Yiratzim with Hashem's name? Yes, except for the brach at the end. Yeah, maybe no line hitting a deer at 3 a.m. Yeah, okay, yeah. But certainly dangerous, going off the road, and the other cars certainly. State troopers. Yeah, different sorts of dangerous disturbances there at the time on the side of the road. Okay, so that's halacha aleph. Let's go on to halacha base. En l'spal leisa ela im ken yesh l'olech l'kol ha'pachas parsa. That's clear. It's Din the Gemara, at least according to the Bahag. V'im b'ratza la'amr al derech pachas mi parsa, because according to Rashi, the ad parsa doesn't mean the length of the trip. The ad parsa is when you have to say it. You have to say it within the first parsa, the first 3.8 kilometers. But if a person wants to, Alter Rebbe brings Shulchan Aruch, he can make the bracha b'liyachtem b'barachat Hashem avol im hu makom muchzik b'sakana tzarich l'amra afilu b'pachas mi parsa. If it's a place which is muchzik, that it's a sakana, then you have to say it even if it's less than a parsa. In any case, we would say that without using Hashem's name, but nevertheless, even less within a city. Especially some cities, it's more dangerous in the road, whether it's walking or even driving, whatever the case is. Then it's proper to say it without the shem. L'chatchila yesh l'spal b'seich parsa rishena. So l'chatchila, you should say it within the first parsa, and that's b'cheishesh to Rashi's period in the Gemara. The Gemara said ad parsa, but it didn't explain what it meant. Rashi explains it means that you should say it within the first parsa. But if you didn't, and if you forgot to say it within the first parsa, and obviously the same thing would apply if you're not sure whether you're outside the city yet, halachically. Yochel ispal calls manshu baderech. So as long as you're still on the trip, you still need the protection. But once you're within the parsa of your destination, so then you can't say it anymore. So then you should say it without using Hashem's name if you didn't remember until you're within the parsa of the place you arrived. But those that want to say, if you remember the beginning of the Gemara, the Gemara spoke, Himalach b'kenech v'tzei. What was the necessity of this whole piece of Gemara over here? Then the Gemara asked, what does it mean, Himalach b'kenech v'tzei? My Himalach b'kenech v'tzei, what does it mean? So he says, Zut Tefilas HaDerech. So what do we gain by knowing that? So one of the explanations of that is that you're asking Hashem for permission to go on your trip. So then obviously you do that at the beginning of the trip. Doesn't make sense to do it later on, even though you might still need protection. Not only you do need protection for the entire length of the trip, but the Himalach Bekenach Vatzei would apply more at the beginning of the trip than later on, which is Pshuta Shel Gemara, as Rashi explains, should be the beginning of the trip. But halacha, you could say it later on as well. Now, let's just speak over here for a minute, because we saw. Let's talk about the Anhaga of the Rebbe. So the Rebbe, we know, went up to Camp Gan Yisrael 3 times during the Nesias, and there were people in the car. And at least one of the times, the Rebbe and the Chaimushka sent along Mazenis for the Rebbe to eat. And we know that, first of all, that the Rebbe, it seems that it was each time that they left by the Tappan Zee Bridge instead of the George Washington Bridge. And the Rebbe made the bracha on the other side of the bridge. In addition, he didn't eat the mezanis. The idea of eating the mezanis would be a bracha smucha l'chavrata that we're going to see soon in the next halach in Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. But let's take the first part of where the Rebbe said it and what might be the reason for that. So when you're within a city, or if there are cities on either side of the road, and you never left the Ibura Shel Ir, so then you're not hichzik HaDerech yet, even though you might be driving for quite some time from Crown Heights till you hit the Tappan Zee Bridge. But nevertheless, it's still a question whether you're in the city or not. That's one possibility, one possible way to understand it. It's also, there's not really such easy places to say it ma'umat and to tell the shayara to stop. One time at least, they stopped at a gas station, and that's when the Rebbe got out and washed his hands and said the Tefilas HaDerech standing up. At least one of the times, the Rebbe said explicitly, one time the Rebbe just didn't eat, and another time it says, brings Reb Shmuel Levittin was there in the car, and he offered the Rebbe something to eat, and the Rebbe answered, Medarf nisht. So he said explicitly that you don't need to do it. But as far as the distance from the city, where to say it, so Dayan Raskin has a whole long discussion in his Siddur, and he looked it up, and he says that the Tappan Zee Bridge is longer than a parsa. So it's like 5 kilometers long, the Tappan Zee Bridge. So obviously on the Tappan Zee Bridge, there's nobody living on the Tappan Zee Bridge, and there's nobody living in the middle of the river either. So that is perhaps the first time where you had clearly a trip that was outside Ibura Shel Ir. So perhaps that's the reason where the Rebbe said only after crossing the bridge, where it was without any question outside the city, and then at the beginning of that, they stopped shortly afterwards, and then it was the Tefilas HaDerech at that time. That's one way to learn it. Another way to learn it is that since it doesn't have to be, it's only according to Rashi that you have to do it at the beginning. So to hold up the shayara, it's only miyes tev, and the Rav Chisda stopped because the whole shayara stopped, or the whole shayara stopped because the Rav Chisda stopped. And then the Rav Sheisha said, you remember from the Gemara, so Rav Sheisha said that the whole shayara, Rashi explained over here, that they're not traveling anymore, the Rav Sheisha said. So I also, I should say it also at that time, but that it has to be mamash at the beginning is also not necessarily mukhrach. So to extrapolate from the Rebbe's hanhagas in this is dangerous, as it is always. You see, the Rebbe does something, and if you don't have a halachic source for it, then you don't know how to extrapolate it. You don't know what the Rebbe's cheshbeinus were. The fact is, they're not even sure what the Rebbe said. We know by the Rebbe Rashab, he said word by word with the Frierdiker Rebbe. When the Frierdiker Rebbe was young, so you should learn how to say Tefilas HaDerech. But by the Rebbe, you don't even know exactly what he said either. So it's difficult to extrapolate. But on the other hand, we do see different days in halacha that are clearly corresponding to this hanhaga. Let's go further with the Kitzur and mention the idea of a brachas l'mucha l'chaverta. So the Kitzur, and this is again, it's another reason to learn things from the Makar, because you look in Kitzur, so Sif Gimel, Tefilas HaDerech tzrichin la'amra samach labracha cheres. That Tefilas HaDerech, it starts with the Yiratzin, so you have to say it next to another bracha. Lashon Rabbeinu, but the Lashon the Alter Rebbe in Shulchan Aruch is Tefilas lasmicha leis a bracha. That it's good to put it next to another bracha. So he doesn't say tzrichin. The Alter Rebbe says it's good. And the Siddur, he leaves it out altogether. In the big Shulchan Aruch, the Mechaber says it as a fact that the Maram Mir Rottenberg used to say it in the morning by Hagayim Chazon Tevin Birchas HaShachar. So the Maram Mir Rottenberg was saying it in the morning, evidently, because he hadn't said Birchas HaShachar yet. So he was putting it together, just like we have in our Birchas HaShachar, we have a Hirotzen after that bracha. It's a bracha arucha, it begins with bracha, with baruch and ends in baruch. And then you have a Hirotzen right afterwards. So he would say the Hirotzen of Tefilas HaDerech right after that bracha in Birchas HaShachar. Now, how was he saying it before he was on the road? So one possibility is that he paskin, that's the way you say Tefilas HaDerech, is when you made up your mind to go. It's possibly held like that, but it's more likely, or certainly it's more l'chol hadayis, that once you're in the middle of the trip, so then the Rav Poskim hold that you say it before you actually left. So even if you're on Monday going from Montreal to Toronto, and Tuesday you're going from Toronto to Winnipeg, nevertheless, you say it in Montreal when you leave to Montreal, and you say it in Toronto in the morning, even before you leave. So then you could say it in the morning with Birchas HaShachar, like the Maram Mir Rottenberg did. But to extrapolate from his hanhaga, maybe that's the only time that he said it. Maybe the first day he didn't say it like that. It wasn't smucha l'chaverta. The Rav Poskim don't learn like that. They learn that he said a smucha l'chaverta. So either he left early in the morning, the Poskim explains. He left when it was too early. He wanted to say Birchas HaShachar later on. As we have many minhagim and Nagashkenaz and others that they say Birchas HaShachar only when they start to daven. They don't say Birchas HaShachar right when they wake up like we do. So then, if it was too early to daven, so then they started their trip and then they stopped along the way, and then it was light enough to put on talis and tefillin. They put on talis and tefillin. They said Birchas HaShachar, and that Birchas HaShachar said Tefilas HaDerech. Maybe that's what the Maram Mir Rottenberg did. But in any case, we see that Rebbe didn't do it. So if a person just looks at Kitzur Shulchan Aruch and says Tzrichin la'amra, it says the befeidah shadin Shulchan Aruch. You have to say it. Okay, so the Alter Rebbe said taib, but it's taib to say. Why did the Rebbe not say it? But there are a number of questions and problems with doing it. In any case, the Kitzur continue. And if you're left early in the morning and then you're saying Birchas HaShachar in the middle of the trip, or you're in the middle of the trip and you stayed overnight, I brought the example that when you're going in the second leg of the trip from Toronto, you can say it even in the hotel before you leave. And then you didn't say Birchas HaShachar yet, so So just like we have, what's going to be with the second Yiratzon, I guess like Shemana Esrei, the brachas of Muchal Chaverta, so all of the brachas Shemana Esrei are Muchal Chaverta from the first baruch and the first bracha Shemana Esrei. Let's say that you davened first and then you went on your trip, let's say the first day. What do you do then? So the Kitzur says, either eat or drink something in the trip, and then make your bracha achrena. That's how you make it samach lachaverta. Or go to the bathroom, and then after the Yasher Yotzer, you put it next to that. Now, the bros and muchal lachaverta, many of the poskim disagree with this eitzah yechel yishta eiza davar ala derech, that when you're going to make a bracha rishena, what exactly are you going to do? You're going to make a bracha shakol, and you're going to drink something. Brei Guffen, you're going to drink some wine. Okay, you can make a Brei Guffen. Then you're going to drink the wine, or you're going to make Tefilas HaDerech. If you're going to drink the wine, in order to not be mafsik between the bracha, the wine, or the food, so then you're being mafsik between the bracha and the Tefilas HaDerech. And if you're going to leave it till after Tefilas HaDerech, so then you're being mafsik with Tefilas HaDerech. It's not me'ain the bracha b'chlal. What happened to your bracha that you're making on the food? And you're davening in the middle, something totally unrelated. So that's why they say the poskim. That's why the Hagam Chasod and Tevim begins with Baruch. It's a long bracha, begins and ends with Baruch. So then that's the sort of bracha you can make Samach L'chaberta. And that's why Nasha Yatsu would be the same way, has Baruch at the beginning and the end. And so to an Alamichi would have at the beginning and then. So to eat Mazenes would be a way to do it. Now, the Rebbe didn't do it. Does that mean we don't have to do it? It's because the Alter Rebbe omitted it. The Alter doesn't mention in the Siddur anything about doing it smucha l'chavrata. That might be the reason, in which case it would apply to us as well. And he says, Mishayich b'derech. So if you did it right, when shayich b'derech, and then who says you're going to be able to eat then, or go to the bathroom then, or whatever the case is? So maybe that's the reason, then it would apply to us too. It's also possible that the Rebbe, a Rav is not supposed to eat in front of his Talmidim, and how much more so a Rebbe, if it's not so this mitzvah, whatever the case is, a whole discussion about eating in front of other people. So maybe the Rebbe didn't want to eat. In that case, it applies to the Rebbe, doesn't apply to us. So how to extrapolate from that, whether we should or we shouldn't. So you could ask your mashpia, but there's nothing wrong with not doing it, and nothing wrong with doing it. The Alter Rebbe said in the Shulchan Aruch Tev, it's omitted. It could be it's omitted from the Siddur. He doesn't bring all the pratim in the Siddur that he brings in Shulchan Aruch. So maybe that's the reason why. So we didn't finish all the halachas yet. I just wanted to point out, this is the easiest way. So Dayan Raskin has in a Siddur, he quoted from a few just interesting things in Aveda, Derech Aveda, Al-Pi Chassidus. So this is from the Rebbe, from Parshas Bereishis, Tafshin Yud Zayin. So here you have in the middle of the page, the italics, HaKavanah b'Koshas v'Teilichenu l'Sholem, that you should send me on my trip in peace. Hainu l'malas HaKavanah b'Yeridas Nishmosei b'Gufei, that you should fulfill the intention Hashem had in bringing your soul down to the body. That's the trip we're talking about. That it shouldn't drown in the angry waters of this world. And you should return us in peace. Not only in the case where you did something wrong, that everything you did in this world should have an elevation before Hashem, be elevated to the world of Atzilus. And that's V'sachas Yireinu L'Sholem. And on the Inyam V'sitneini al derech Avedas, and Yud Beis Tammuz Toshach Chav Daled, he brings down over here Kasher Helech L'Darkei B'Mataru L'Avedas Hashem. And when a person is going on a trip with the intention of serving Hashem, that's the goal of his trip. Shezeu Inyan Himalech B'Kenech V'Tzei. That's the idea that you took advice, you consulted your creator, and then you went out, because what you're doing is part of your Avedis Hashem. Even a Divrei Reshut says, called myself Hashem Shemaim, called the Rachecha Deyu. The Rebbe in the Sikh was talking about going out in the summer, Merkah Shlichus, and to camps and so on. But it would apply to all cases. So So then the bracha comes specially to the individual. The Eibishter gives you a bracha that you should be successful in your goal, and you went out to accomplish, that it should all be with Hatzlacha. Okay, so any questions?
To summarize Alter Rebbe, anyone that goes on a trip only really makes one bracha b'Shem Malchus, regardless of when they come back.
That's what it looks like from the Siddur, yeah.
Is this what we're known to do?
We're known to do like the Alter Rebbe, yeah. And there are those who want to teach at Shuvei, that the Alter Rebbe said, to say that is until the last leg of your trip. but according to the explanation of Pri Chodesh, it would not seem to justify making a bracha.
Does that mean it's wrong to make that last bracha coming back?
It looks like from the Alter Rebbe not to make it. More than that, I can't say. And again, there are those that say, "What if I didn't say all the days in between?" So then I was mamish missing the whole time. So maybe I must make a bracha at the end of the trip. But if the Rambam doesn't bring down the bracha at all, if that's the reason, and this is mentioned by the Pri Chodesh, the Hillel David, it's mentioned as this being part of the Alter Rebbe's reasoning. So then it wouldn't make a matter. It wouldn't make any difference whether you said it in the intermediate days or not. Okay, a good Yom Tov, Ksiyos Simateva, Limud Achsidis, Darkei Achsidis, Kol Tov.
Simchas